Another edition of the Outside Shots podcast, but the first ever March Madness edition of the Outside Shots podcast presented by thelines.com. You can follow us on Twitter at TheLinesUS. You can follow me on Twitter at Eli Herskovich. I'll get to my guest co-host here in a second for this special edition of Outside Shots, but first and foremost, remember to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications whenever a new episode of Outside Shots or any sports betting market by thelines.com is released. We're also giving away a $25 Amazon gift card in our daily March Madness Pick'em contest. Our bracket pool contest will come out on Monday as well. For more details, head over to play.thelines.com. And as always, join the Lines Discord channel to get notifications when we place bets on March Madness futures or game-to-game bets, including a bet I'll have in, I think, once you're listening to this podcast. So check it out. Head over to thelines.com for more details. But without further ado, to my right virtually, checking in here with Justin Perry at JustinPerry8 on Twitter. He works all things college basketball betting for Shot Quality and Shot Quality Bets. Justin, what's going on, man? Happy Selection Sunday turn March Madness.
Hey, Eli. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Happy Selection Sunday. I can't believe we've made it this far. It feels like just yesterday we were talking about, how the season was going to go for some of these teams, and now we're here stacking them up in the ultimate competition. I'm so excited. The bracket, I think, has come out in such a great way. I think the committee did a pretty good job getting us some great matchups. It's going to be really exciting to dive into it here and just give some of the thoughts and shot quality data.
For sure. Here's the layout for the podcast for the people. Before we get started, we're going to touch on shot quality and how you can use it and how it's best applicable for your March Madness bets. Then we'll hit on the one underseeded team that Justin and I both think, or at least for each of us think, was underseeded in the dance and maybe didn't get a great draw, especially with a first-round matchup. Then we'll go into bets for the first four and first-round round of 64 bets. And then we'll touch on Final Four futures to wrap things up. A futures bet that I'm looking at, along with, just Final Four picks in general, and maybe a title winner to top it off. But Justin, want to tip things off here with shot quality and shot quality bets. I know the value bracket is something you guys are highlighting over there. So why don't you dig into it here quickly about how bettors can really take advantage, and not only take advantage of your site in a good way, but take advantage of the betting market as well.
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with getting a good advantage in this world that we play in every day, right? And shot quality and shot quality bets now is really designed to do that. So shot quality got started as a decision-making data set for coaches to use, and now has been extrapolated. The same data is extremely valuable for anybody who wants to get a better understanding of college basketball, regardless of your motives, right? Whether you're a gambler, you're a coach, maybe you're just a fan. Shot quality unlocks the ability to understand how valuable the shots a team are developing on offense and allowing on defense really are, right? So ignoring the variance that is so natural to the game of basketball when you're shooting a ball into a hoop from 15 plus feet away, it's just there's such natural variance that what you see in a game-by-game basis isn't always the best representation of who actually played better or got the better shots, or in our viewpoint, I guess a more reliable win, right? Like if you were to repeat the performance, the same shots by the same players, would you expect the same result? Oftentimes in basketball, you'd say no, right? Teams get hot, teams get cold, players are hot or cold, missing easy buckets, dunks, layups get missed, free throws. Everyone pulls their hair out of a free throws this time of the year. So I shouldn't have to tell anyone who's too deep into college basketball like myself just what the value of, I guess, ignoring some of the box score bias that we get from seeing these results and seeing a team get really hot. Shot quality brings it down to what are you actually developing. And so we have models that predict our shot quality scores, and we use those for developing edges in the gambling markets and have been pretty successful. I mean, the model runs something around, I believe, 53.75, 53.8% right now across almost 4,000 plays this season. So been a good year, and it's exciting to use this data in new ways.
Yeah, and just for bettors that maybe novice bettors or aren't familiar with shot quality, when somebody says 53.7%, you might scoff because, again, to bettors who don't bet that often or haven't been doing it for a while, haven't been dealing with variance, which is something that is extremely important to shot quality data, that percentage might not be worth much to you. But think about it this way. A good sports bettor hits about 54% of his bets in a given sport. So 53.7% across over 4,000 plays is pretty awesome. And then just to kind of touch on something that you hit on a little bit and something that I use shot quality for, it's not just, again, variance is such an important thing, not only in college basketball, especially in college basketball, because you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids, but across any sports betting market, because when you think about it, a team could shoot poorly. Heck, one of these teams that Justin and I are going to talk about are probably going to go 0 for 18 from deep in their first round game, and we're going to lose a bet because of it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad bet because the process is there. Granted, it could be a bad bet, but it doesn't always mean it's a bad bet.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And, there's some duality to that, right? There are bad bets that aren't actually bad, and there's good bets that aren't actually good. So there's winning bets that might feel like, oh, you placed the greatest bet, but you go look at some shot quality data and our expectation is that you shouldn't have covered that play, or you should have had the total stay a lot lower and you were on the over. And what that allows us to do is kind of refine our process based on multiple data points, right? It's not just this one result that we have to try to evaluate if we've won our bet or not. It's like a second option to help further understand, all right, did I get a little lucky? Did this team that I bet on actually put themselves in the place to win my wager and then also execute? Or were we missing execution? Were we missing the, actual like underneath performance and just hit all of our threes? I've won plenty of bets because the other team just didn't hit anything. I mean, that's the greatest thing in the world. But you're going to win, like 25% of your bets, and you're going to lose 25% of your bets because of just variance related things. One team's hot, one team's not. It's that other 50% of those bets that you want to put yourself in the best position possible when it's almost like both teams are in like a relatively normal zone in terms of like the craziness that can happen on a college basketball floor.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because think about UNC last year, right? The favorite to win it all. They faced some teams on their run to the title game, obviously losing to Kansas at the buzzer. Caleb Love airball on a 3, I believe, and just terrible couple possessions after Baycott hurt his ankle. But they faced some teams that struggled from 3, and this was a team that had a pretty high or allowed a pretty high open percent or open amount of threes. You go back to the UCLA game and the Sweet 16, a team that didn't shoot threes very well. So the Tar Heels definitely got lucky on that run. Granted, they had a very talented team that underperformed in the regular season, but just something to note there when you think about variance. And you might get a team, you might have a Final Four futures bet or a team like Justin mentioned on a game-by-game basis that wins a given game, goes on a deep run because they receive variance. And that doesn't always mean it's the correct side or the correct kind of run, I guess. Like look at UCLA going back to 2021. They lived on mid-range jump shots, and they also got a lot of variance from their opponents from the free throw line. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have made that run. That also means that they didn't get lucky. So all those things go into play when you're looking at if a team should have covered, if a team should have made it all the way to the title game like UNC. But Justin, want to dive in here before we get into bets here for the first 4 in the first round of 64, looking at an underseeded team in the bracket. So for me, when I look at each region, what sticks out to me is the Midwest region because Texas A&M, after making it to the SEC championship game and obviously getting blitzed by Alabama, maybe if that game was a little closer, then they don't end up with the number 7 seed, or obviously if the Aggies win the game outright, they definitely don't end up with that number 7 seed. But I still thought A&M probably should have gotten a number 6 seed when you dig into some of their metrics and how good this team is on the glass, and in the SEC as well. It wasn't necessarily a top 2 conference. I think the Big 12 and Big 10 take the cake there, but still a top 4 conference across college basketball in the context of how well they performed against SEC opponents. And they get Penn State in the first round. I know you have a bet on this game that we'll maybe get to a little bit later, but they face the number 10 seed Nittany Lions, and it is an awful matchup for the Aggies, considering Penn State doesn't turn the basketball over very often. They shoot a ton of threes, and A&M allows a pretty high open 3-point attempt rate when you go look at the shot quality data. So just a couple of big areas where the Aggies could get exposed against this Nittany Lions team that made it all the way to the Big Ten tournament championship game itself.
Yeah, no, definitely going to be a tough path for them. That Midwest region is very interesting. I was going to go there too myself. I was going to talk a little bit about Iowa State, who is a 6 seed. I feel like they are a little underseeded. I know that they had a tough stretch, but I feel like the defense is so legitimate that they getting put on the 6th line instead of probably, I thought that they deserved a 5. I know that, there was a couple bad games, but what teams in this 5-6 range haven't had a couple bad games? There's a lot of parity in college basketball this year. And that's what makes this bracket and these conversations so much fun, is because there is so much truth to almost anyone's argument. Everyone has a point, which is so great. But I think Iowa State is in a little bit of a tough draw. I really like Texas in that region. Obviously Houston's over there. You talk about a tough, even 5-12 matchup between Miami and Drake in the Midwest.
Which is big for the Canes.
Right. Yeah. And it's going to be very, very interesting. I'm excited about this. I think this Midwest is going to be one of the most exciting ones to watch. But yeah, I do think they're a little underseeded there in Iowa State. And another one is a 6 across the board here in the South. I feel like, I don't know if you agree with me, Eli, but I feel like Creighton got a little bit penalized for the absence of Kalkbrenner for a lot of their season. I think everyone was so high on Creighton that they were so naturally set up to fail this season. There was very little way that they were going to deliver, especially battling injuries. 12 losses is just, a little bit of a result of that. And shot quality, this is going to be one of those teams in shot quality that isn't going to be that far down. We have them as our 20th best team, so we probably expect them to be on the 4-5 line rather than the 5-6 line here. So could be an interesting spot for Creighton in the East. Of course, I have to go through Alabama, top seed. In the South, top seed, of course, and it's going to be a tough run. I don't know. Creighton could wake up and they have the ability on both sides of the ball there to really get it done. So it should be pretty interesting. Other teams that just, shot quality is really high on, that things maybe didn't work out this season. Iowa is the number 6 team in shot quality, just hasn't been able to hit the shots that they're able to generate. Illinois is a top 10 shot quality team at the moment, so they're pretty strong. But those are and then Creighton is top 20. So those are some of the bigger seeding mismatches that we have over at SQ.
Yeah, and then because again, you and I, it's not like we're just looking at data, and not to right. Shot quality data is fantastic from a betting standpoint.
It's not the end-all, be-all, of course.
Right. You look at a team, because Illinois stands out, and I'll touch on their first-round matchup against Arkansas a bit later on. That's a team that, cohesion-wise, you look at that game against Penn State, you look at how poorly they played down the stretch. Granted, they didn't have Terrence Shannon Jr. when they probably should have won at Assembly Hall against Indiana going back to mid to late February. But that's a team that I don't think Brad Underwood really developed or developed in Brad Underwood's system as well as the projections thought and as well as the numbers say it should have happened. So you definitely have to take into account a bunch of different variables. But you mentioned parity within that, Justin, and you look at the 2014 NCAA tournament with Connecticut and Kentucky. You had a number 7 seed UConn Huskies team win it all that year, and both teams underperformed. The Wildcats were the number 8 seed and obviously upset the 1 seed in their region, Wichita State, on the way to the national championship game. That was Julius Randle and the Harrison twins. But I don't think we've seen a parity-filled college basketball season, let alone NCAA tournament like this. So I think we're going to have a lot to discuss and a lot of potential upsets here as we move along. No doubt about it, right? I mean, you want to talk about a season like that. I mean, there's a team like Northwestern sitting on a 7 seed that I feel like if they have the type of guards and the type of play that could make some of those big
top 5 seeds crumble if they meet in like the wrong scenarios and they match up poorly. It's a tough team to beat. And you look at a lot of like the 7-6 seeds, like they are some of the tougher teams of the season. I mean, Creighton alone, right, as a 6 is pretty formidable. Kentucky, you're running into Kentucky as a 6. That's not fun if they, of course, don't stumble against Providence, which is yet to be seen. Only about
Bryce
a 3-point
Hopkins
line.
revenge game.
Yeah, I know. That's gonna be a great one. But there's so much at play here, and even that matchup with Kentucky and Providence being such a close one, we have like a couple 10 seeds literally favored. It's going to be really great. I don't think that there's a lot of historical relevance when you have that type of thing. Like everyone talks about, oh, this seed covers this much. I don't know if you should really be factoring that in. I know, the odds makers definitely are not. It's all about how these teams literally match up in terms of their efficiencies, expected efficiencies. And we know defensive efficiency has been a really, really key metric in terms of figuring out who gets deep into this tournament.
Yeah, defense travels. And I know that's a cliche that nobody wants to hear on any podcast anymore, but it definitely matters for the NCAA tournament. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's go into a couple different matchups each. And then I know you have a bunch of bets, Justin. And if you don't follow Justin Perry on Twitter, you'll definitely want to at Justin Perry 8 to follow him for all of his bets. But I want to start off with one of the most vulnerable teams to me in the bracket, let alone among the number 4 seeds. And just starting off surface level here, it's not just Virginia. It's arguably the most vulnerable, exploitable group of number 4 seeds over the last 15 years when you look at KenPom and a bunch of different metric sites. So it's not just the Hoos that can get upset. There are Indiana Hoosiers. I know you bet Indiana. We'll talk about Indiana in a bit, but that's a team that scares the hell out of me for a lot of different reasons. Yeah, it should. Yeah. So the team that, again, I mentioned Virginia, a bet that I haven't made myself, but just a line that kind of sticks out to me that differs from my numbers. I make this game closer to Virginia -3.5, -4 in between there, and obviously the spread as of this recording late Sunday night is sitting around Virginia -5, -5.5, so definitely a bit of an edge there. You were talking about disagreeing with the market earlier, Justin, when it comes to shot quality data. My numbers definitely disagree with the market there. And you think about a Virginia team that's been overvalued consistently in the betting market. Now, I had a Virginia futures bet to win the ACC regular season title, and I got dead heat on that when they tied somehow miraculously with Pitt on the final day of their conference play, going back to a couple Saturdays ago. But losing to Duke in the ACC tournament championship game, and this is a pack line defense, obviously a vaunted pack line defense under Tony Bennett, but they allow a lot of open threes. They allow a top 50 opponent's 3-point scoring rate. So obviously when a defense tries to pack you in and limit dribble penetration, you're going to naturally allow, in theory, more threes. And Furman puts up the 13th highest 3-point attempt rate across college basketball. This was a team, Justin, I want to get your take on this game in a second, but a team that I think just needed to get the monkey off their back to get into the dance to win a SoCon tournament championship. And then I think the pressure will be off. But Sloss and Pegues, this team runs a 5-out offense that I think can space out Virginia, and I think will at least keep this game within a couple possessions. And also, it's the antithesis of Virginia from a tempo standpoint. UVA wants to slow it down. Furman, a top 55 adjusted tempo, actually a top 55 average possession length across college basketball. So I think Furman matches up well. I think the number is inflated. What say you here?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm with you. It's a little bit big. Shot quality is going to come in and have this right around 5 points. So we are making this one 58.4 for Furman and 63.1 for Virginia. So, but that's so shot quality is a little bit slow notoriously to adjust because we don't have instant player changes. Like if a player like Vanderplas goes out with a broken hand, we don't necessarily instantly snap it. It depends on how the team starts to shoot, and that's reflected. So this is really built from the entire body of work that Virginia has put together, which clearly deserves a bit of a downgrade now. I do think Furman is going to give them a run, and I do agree this is one of the weaker four lines we've seen recently. Of course, a lot of people like UConn still, so it's a little bit up
Good
and
luck.
down. I know this. Yeah, I know. But I think Furman should be able to come out, and like you said, they have some really great metrics that we actually love to key in on. They are sixth in rim and three rate, so 89.1% of their possessions result in an attempt at the rim or from three. So just taking the most valuable shots in terms of converting your possessions into points. Spacing is elite, top 10 percentile in spacing. So really excited to see what they're able to do. And of course, the types of shots they're able to produce. One of my favorite metrics that we are able to develop from our positional data is shot selection data. And so Furman takes the 22nd best shots in all of Division I. Virginia is going to limit opponents to the 73rd best shots defensively. So 73rd worst, right? Allowed 73rd best. I don't know. It's all
good
arbitrary,
defense,
but
for
good
sure.
defense, right? Top 20 percentile defense in terms of shot selection. But on the other side of the ball is where I think things are going to get a little bit more interesting. Furman's defense is not exactly anything to write home about. They're below average in terms of shot quality, 194th by our metrics, and they do allow a very high rim and three rate. So they let their opponents get good looks. So this is going to be, to me, if the offense can keep up with what the defense allows, they should be able to cover this. But their issue is going to be locking it down. Virginia is a pretty well-run machine. They were our 16th best offense throughout the season, and expected to actually have some positive regression in their favor on the offensive side of the ball. Really, really strong in the half court, run a really high rate of half court offense, top 50 in executing it by expectations. And really nice in the mid-range. Like they just finished those possessions in the mid-range. They shoot a lot of mid-range shots, which usually isn't great. But, in Virginia's case, they're just able to get it done. And this is actually a place where Furman excels. So if they can stop those mid-range looks from going down and alter what Virginia kind of aims to do, they definitely could disrupt if the offense comes to play. But you're really relying on Furman to come and shoot, I guess, not the lights out, but their expected rates are better. If not, you're just not covering. So,
and you're gonna get right, and you're gonna get, assuming the efficiency is there, you're going to get open looks against this pack line defense. You mentioned Virginia's mid-range shot selection. Nobody, I don't want to say nobody, but there aren't a lot of college basketball players that shoots more mid-range jump shots than Jalen Clark, the East Carolina transfer, going back to a couple of years ago. So this is a UVA team that's improved its three-point efficiency in its own right this year, especially with Armand Franklin. But you mentioned it at the beginning, Justin. Ben Vanderplas, even though he's not a good defender, not having him on the floor in a game where you might have to play a little smaller against a Furman team that, again, can play five out is definitely worth noting for this kind of a matchup. But I want to dive into now I don't know if you want to say your favorite bet. You gave me a list of three among the crap ton of bets that you have for the round of 64 and the first four here in the NCAA tournament bracket. It doesn't even feel real to be breaking this down right now, man. It is.
I know, right?
It's awesome. But why don't you give me your favorite bet or one of your favorite bets here for again, the first four of the round of 64?
Man, this is a tough one, but I'm someone who's, I guess my whole betting strategy has always come from the information available from models, and shot quality has become kind of like my life, I guess is the best way to put it. But, I still pay a lot of attention to what all the most respected models out there do. I mean, my first experience handicapping came from an aggregate, I guess semi learning model that situationally rated KenPom, Hasla, Torvik, and all that good stuff to find where their agreements best worked against the spread. So I still look at some of that stuff, and something that's kind of popping amongst all of those actually incredible models that really do set these lines now. And the market and the public fully respect, is still the San Diego State team. I mean, I'm seeing it, a lot closer to 8 points, and I think San Diego State is really going to be able to take care of business against the Charleston team that has been fairly knocked by their strength of schedule, right? Like, they were not making it if they did not win the Colonial. The Colonial hasn't been great. And some of their wins this season in the non-conference look really different in my eyes because they won them at home for the Charleston Invitational at the beginning of the season when they hosted that tournament, right? So they beat some interesting teams in the non-con, but I don't really think that they've been able to do very well on the road against this type of team. It just might be a tough challenge. I mean, I know that I've personally fallen in love with the San Diego State team before and had them going far in like my brackets, even before, I was like professionally covering the sport. Like I remember the pain of like San Diego State teams just not going very far.
Ryan Dutcher fever, man.
I know. But in this first round here, I just can't help but think that they're going to have the defense to lock it down. They don't really shoot a lot of threes, but they're super efficient at the rim. I think it's going to be tough for Charleston to handle. I just think this number is a little too short. And I think this is, Charleston had a storied season, is going to go dancing, is going to give it to them probably for a while. But, come that under 12-minute type of play in the second half, I just really like San Diego State to pull away. 5's just not going to be enough. So I think that's a really smart play. One of my few actually for Thursday.
Okay. So great breakdown by you there. And looking at this thing, because this is going to be a pace play too. I mentioned that with Virginia and Furman. San Diego State wants to slow you down in a big way. Charleston wants to speed you up. So granted, this San Diego State defense, one of the best perimeter defenses in college basketball, and they're not really due for regression because it's interesting when you dive into defensive profiles, especially against the elite upper echelon perimeter defenses. Sometimes it's just that their opponents or they're getting lucky because their opponents are missing threes. But for the Aztecs, they pressure the ball and they don't allow clean looks. They allow very little airspace from behind the arc. And this is a Charleston team that puts up the 28th highest three-point scoring rate in the country. And then you couple that with San Diego State's ball screen defense. You mentioned how Dutcher teams are maybe underseeded or have a profile of a team that can make a run because of their elite defense. This ball screen defense for San Diego State, I would say, isn't as nearly as elite as we've seen in years past. I think the shot quality data would agree with me there. But yeah, I think the Aztecs defensively from a physicality standpoint, if they're able to control the tempo, because again, if Charleston is doing that and they're getting open looks in transition, even though they're up against an elite defense overall, then good night. Because San Diego State, it's kind of similar, just because this is the first matchup that pops into my head when you go back to when Virginia was upset by UMBC. Just going back to that Hoos team, you play at such a slow tempo that you only have so many possessions to make up for a massive deficit. So with San Diego State, they rank outside of the, I think, top 100 in offensive efficiency, so around the 120 range. So I agree with you that San Diego State should theoretically control the tempo. And again, with those defensive guards with Lamont Butler and Darion Trammell, the Seattle transfer, Matt Bradley, they generate turnovers, even though Charleston doesn't turn over a ton. So, but if Charleston's controlling the pace and hitting threes, I think it's going to be tough for San Diego State's offense to make up for it.
Yeah, no, they're going to need to like methodically shut them down. Essentially, if they're able to get their looks, it's going to be tough. But we rate them as the 7th best defense in the country against off the dribble 3-pointers, which this Charleston team takes at a top 100 frequency. They love the catch and shoot threes as well. And San Diego State is used to defending that out in the Mountain West. So I think that what Charleston brings to the table is not anything that San Diego State isn't used to. And, what's really interesting is you go on our shot quality bets matchup breakdowns and you have all this like green versus red, and Charleston's actually, there's a lot of green on their defense, but it's hard to take that like seriously because think about who they were defending. right?
Right.
Like it might look like they don't allow a lot of isolation points per possession, but you got to think that they were, the positive side of the mismatch in most isolation situations in the Colonial. So like, I just don't know if they're, fully ready to go up against a team like San Diego State that has some very good defensive guards that are going to be able to take away their best weapons, that are efficient attacking the rim, that run the pick and roll effectively, that know how to get moves down low in the post to open up effective mid-range looks. And then again, they're a top 60 team in defending the 3-point shot. So if Charleston's going to need those threes, I think this San Diego State team is one that might be able to take away their lifeline. So that's what type of stuff I look for. The models love it. Efficiency models love it. It's interesting to me that this one's still sitting at 4.5, 5s in some places, but yeah, I took the 4.5.
All right, so let's keep it rolling here. I'll go back to another matchup in the South region. We actually might get a couple double-digit seeds facing off in the round of 32 per my projection. So this is Duke, and Justin, a lot of bettors like myself would love to fade Duke in the past. Yeah, so the number 5 seeded Blue Devils, the ACC tournament champs, after reeling off a bunch of victories in a row to end the regular season and obviously in the ACC tournament, they're taking on the number 12 seed Oral Roberts. And you go back to, first off, I do want to say, I think the mascot's name on Oral Roberts is named Eli or nicknamed Eli. So just want to throw that out there. But
no bias.
Exactly, no bias. But you go back to, man, this game is taking place. I want to say it's Thursday. Yeah, Thursday at 6 o'clock. Duke lost to, who was it? The CJ McCollum-led 15 seed going back to, I think it was...
Lehigh.
Lehigh, yes. The round of 64 Friday game around the same time. So I don't want to say it's a bad omen, but I just want to throw that out there going back a ways. Yeah, about a decade or so ago. So this Oral Roberts team to me, I make this spread, by the way, it's sitting at around 6.5 as of this recording. I make it around closer to Duke minus 4.5 or minus 5. So you look at this from a market standpoint and from a metric standpoint, because I understand that Duke's perimeter defense, it's kind of similar to San Diego State for me, and I'm curious about your breakdown on this shot quality wise too, Justin, because I don't think Duke's defense from 3 is necessarily exploitable. Like, this is still an upper echelon Duke defense, and Oral Roberts revolves around the 3 with Max Asmus. We saw that Oral Roberts team make that Sweet 16 run and nearly upset Arkansas going back to a couple of years ago, almost getting themselves into the Elite Eight after knocking off Ohio State and Florida in the first couple of rounds. But what Oral Roberts does really well is they pressure the ball. And this is especially in conference play, and I know you might say, okay, it's the Summit League. Their opponent's turnover rate, they're forcing the second highest opponent's turnover rate in Summit League play. Does that translate when you go up against Duke? Like Duke. But then you look at Duke's turnover problems, man, in ACC play, and it's bad. It wasn't exploited a ton in the ACC tournament, but Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach both can have their concerns with turnovers. So if Oral Roberts can force turnovers, again, this goes back to the first couple games we've discussed so far when you think of controlling the pace, because Duke wants to slow it down, which is a bit opposite of the way they played over the last couple years under Coach K. And obviously in John Shire's first season, Oral Roberts wants to play up tempo, and they could space the floor. So it's similar to the Charleston breakdown for me. If Oral Roberts is able to control the pace and turn Duke over, and again, they have the size to rebound the ball and control the glass against a pretty big Duke front court. Connor Vanover, the ugly Arkansas transfer, has made his way down to Oklahoma this season. And again, him against Lively also is an interesting matchup. I know he's not necessarily a physical big, but he has the size to match up against this Duke front court. So if Oral Roberts is turning Duke over and pressuring the ball like I think they can, again, Kareem Thompson, one of the better on-ball defenders, not only among mid-major programs, but across college basketball. I think Oral Roberts is live to pull this off, but again, per my numbers, that spread is inflated.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And so here's some good shot quality data on it. So Duke is allowing opponents to shoot just 30% from three this season. Shot quality is expecting 34%. So 3.7% is the exact difference in our expectation based on the shots taken against them. We know that the ACC has been a little weak, but it actually mostly came from their non-conference schedule. So expected to give up a little bit more. And just across the season, expected to be allowing 0.06 points per possession more through the whole year. I mean, that's pretty high. I've seen some higher ones, of course, but that is definitely on the higher end of the range. Their defense is outperforming expectations for sure. Duke, though, I mean, look, good rebounding team, but what is important about this matchup, like you said, that 3-point shooting. And what stands out to me here is, Oral Roberts is going to come in as the number 5 team in off the dribble 3-point points per possession. So very effective at shooting those shots. And they take the 3rd most off the dribble 3-point shots in the nation. They take them at 23% of their possessions, which is crazy. And Duke is not exactly good at defending that type of 3-pointer. They're actually quite good at defending the catch and shoot, but off the dribble is something that their defenders have difficulty with, according to our data. 218th at allowing points, and don't really see it much. So they're not exactly used to it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. Of course, midcourt Max is going to be out doing his thing. Let's hope. It's really a lot of fun. This team is really interesting. I mean, I always wonder what if O'Banner was still there. This would just be like a super team coming out of the summit. But no, I think this is going to be a great matchup. I do think Oral Roberts is live to do it. Shot quality doesn't really agree with us. We're projecting this to be a 10-point win for Duke. But, winning the ACC, and it tends to be, the history seems to be that teams that cut down the nets tend to fizzle out a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked if fading Duke gets you a win against the spread or two, maybe even more if they survive. I think they could end up winning this, but I wouldn't be shocked. I don't hate the money line sprinkle on Oral Roberts. Like, this is the year they're waiting for this. This is exactly who to come out and make a statement against. I don't know. This is going to be one of the best matchups of the first 2 days.
I'm really glad you brought up your point about teams that have success in their respective conference tournaments, not necessarily, or that doesn't necessarily bode well in March Madness, because historically you look at 8 of the last 20 champions that have cut down the nets in April won their conference tournament. So we're talking 40%. It's not that high. It's not even 50%. So you don't have to win your conference tournament. You don't have to be the hot team. And just relating this to the betting market, that also goes to show you that a lot of these teams that win the conference tournament, or it doesn't, I mean, we're talking outright versus against the spread, but still, even from a seeding standpoint, a team could be overvalued with their own seed because they won their conference tournament, and that correlates to the betting market. So don't necessarily, not just with Duke or another team that won their conference tournament, let's say with Texas. I know Justin and I both have a big opinion on the Longhorns that we'll get to here in a bit when we break down our Final Four picks and national title winner. And I don't know if I'm going to have a national title winner right now, to be honest, just because it's Sunday night, but at least Final Four picks, Four picks. You don't always necessarily want to gravitate to the conference tournament champs. So, Justin, want to get to a couple other picks of yours, and I just want to skim through here. I know you have a bunch to get to here. You already mentioned San Diego State. Tennessee is also on your list. Memphis against FAU, a great first-round matchup, an 8-9 matchup. Indiana against Sincere Carey and Kent State. That matchup scares the hell out of me for the Hoosiers. And Marquette against Vermont. So I'll let you pick from that group. And then we'll get to some notes on some of the other games on that list here. What game do you want to hit on next?
Look, I feel pretty good about Tennessee. I think Louisiana has a really tough matchup here, Eli. Yeah. I just feel like they're going to run into exactly the type of team that they were hoping they could avoid, which is the defense of Tennessee that people were talking about it mid-season. This is one of the better Tennessee teams we've ever seen. I think they're going to be able to lock down Louisiana defensively. Louisiana, of course, got a nice big couple wins there in the Sun Belt to get to this point, but I don't know. This is probably a big accomplishment for them getting here, and I just can see them getting just outworked by Tennessee in the second half. It's just a different level of motor between these teams. It's just, much more defensive efficiency. Louisiana is kind of a team I feel like Tennessee is going to be able to scheme out a couple of their best players and really just take away their options. And they're probably going to end up settling for mid-range jumpers a little bit too much. Get chased off the 3-point line. Tennessee does that pretty effectively. Shot quality is going to project this one around 15. A lot of other models are pretty close on that. I think it's pretty safe to say that 10.5 is going to be a little low here. I feel pretty comfortable laying a big number. Tennessee is going to make a statement. This is one of those teams that really wants to make a run. I'm not sure how far I'm going to have them go.
No Ziegler.
But yeah, it's definitely in the air this year for the Volunteers.
No, I'm with you. And the name I just brought up there really quickly, Zakai Ziegler, obviously, that's a big loss for Tennessee. One of their primary ball handlers, even though Vescovi has taken that role on in years past before they had a couple of point guards in Chandler and Ziegler. Yeah, go ahead.
It's definitely something that's going to hurt them against the spread and market evaluations as we go on, but here against a team like Louisiana, who they should be able to match up with well, even missing some of their better options at the point. I just, that's not somewhere where Louisiana is really going to get them. The guard play should still be pretty superior for this Tennessee team. There's probably some guards who play on the bench that could start for Louisiana quite easily. And that's exactly what you're going to see. It's going to be in the second unit. It's going to be, the guys coming off the bench that are just going to outplay some of the everyone they're lining up against still. So it's just going to be tough. I think it's going to be a good game, though. It's going to be a fun wager. I'm not going to sit here and say I expect a 35-point win and you can just sit back in the rocking chair. I think this line is set pretty well. It's still going to be competitive. But we have the edge that we're looking for on a line like this. And this is one of those swings that you want to take because we do think it's going to come home at 55%. So that's the hope, right? So it should be fun.
No, I'm with you. I mentioned the Ziegler nugget, but you look at Louisiana's front court and they run through Jordan Brown, the ex-5-star the ex-5-star big that initially went to Arizona and played for Sean Miller. He then transferred to Nevada. And now you look at Tennessee's front court just going up against a big like this where he averages the 54th or he ranks 54th in terms of the possession rate across individual players in Division I. So this is a team that runs through their big, and then you think about Kamwa and Adu, Tennessee's lengthy front court. Yes, they're without some significant guard play in Ziegler, and yes, three-point variance could come into play the rest of the way for the Vols, but I don't think it really matters in this matchup. I'm with you, Justin. I do think this line is a little bit short against Tennessee's length. Believe it or not, I was digging into this earlier. Greg Williams, who is one of Louisiana's better guards in their starting lineup, was on that St. John's team because he transferred to Louisiana. He was on the Red Storm team that had Shamori Pons in 2019. So just a name drop there. That was one of my favorite players over the last 5 years, decade in college basketball. I love that St. John's team. So just a fun nugget there looking at Louisiana. But Justin, why don't you quickly go through some of the other first round bets and a nugget or two for each?
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. So I'm going to be going with a few bets here. Lines are, of course, moving, but I jumped on Vermont to keep it a little bit closer against that Marquette team. Of course, we know that there's been some issues for Shaka Smart here in the first round. Eli, you and I were actually going back and forth about that a little bit ourselves, but this Vermont team should be able to keep it within 10 points. I think they are pretty formidable. They do match up a little bit rough because of the size, but I do think that they should be able to shoot their way out of things. They have some playmakers that should be able to get things done. I'm going to take Kentucky. I'm laying the 3 against Providence. I just think this is a little bit of a short line for Kentucky. They have been manufacturing better offense than what it looks like. And then Providence, look, I love Ed Cooley as much as everybody else. He's honestly, I think one of their biggest X factors is that man can coach. And he is part of the reason that they were one of those stories last year that everyone said was so
Shot
lucky.
Quality.
I know. And look, he gets great looks for his team, but I think it's just a tough spot for them. They aren't nearly as dominant down low, and that's going to be a little bit problematic here against Kentucky. I'm laying a big number with Gonzaga at 14.5, and shot quality is 25, Eli. And that just makes me feel like, what we've seen from Grand Canyon is just so much luck. They shot the lights out in their tournament. I think they hit over 50% from three for the duration of their entire conference tournament to get here. That's just not going to happen against this Gonzaga team. And even if it does, Gonzaga may still put up more than 20 points than they can even think about mustering. I mean, this Gonzaga team is just disgusting. They're playing at a high level, and I mean that in the best way. I don't know. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think Gonzaga is a team you want to be on in the first round. They should run away with it. They have the conditioning to do so as well. I'm going to take Montana State plus the 9.5 against Kansas State. I just think that's one of my favorite underdogs to get right now. And I think the numbers come down a little bit, but I still like it. Kansas State, I think, is going to be in a really interesting situation. First-year coach, probably just looking to get out of that game. I like it to stay a little bit tighter and the points be worth a lot in a scenario like that. Plus, Montana State has the size and the shooters, and we're a little criminally undervalued for most of the season. There was some other talk out there in the is that the Big Sky? Yeah, I think that's the Big Sky. Oh man, 32 conferences, bro. But it's going to be a really good one. I like that Montana State team a lot. And then you touched on it. I'm laying the number with Indiana. I think this is one where a lot of models agree, but the line is still a little short. I think it should be a little closer to 8. Kent isn't that type of team that is ready for what, Trace Jackson Davis and Hood Schifino can do in the mid-range. They're reliable shot creators, and they're going to play pretty well on defense. Shot quality has actually, been a little low on Indiana this season. They finished outside the top 50 in shot quality, but we're still expecting this one to be closer to double digits than we are to 5.
Yeah, and I think you also have Memphis in the mix there, too.
Oh, yeah, I do. I do have a couple others in here. Sorry. Memphis is definitely in the mix. I got them at 1.5. I mean, this is a Conference USA rematch of old, right? So these teams know each other. Memphis, I think, is playing their best basketball at the best possible time, giving them 2 points. It might even be 3 now. I don't think that's going to be enough. I'm such a Kendrick Davis fan. He is just
best point guard in the country.
Oh, he is just such a great facilitator, and that is exactly what you want in March. I think it's a type of player you can hang your hat on. Penny Hardaway finally getting it done with this team. It's so much fun to see. They just handled Houston. They're going to be coming in sky high, feeling really good. I think this is a good place for them to keep clicking. And, FAU kind of snuck by UAB. They didn't sneak by UAB, but they snuck by Middle Tennessee for sure. So I feel like there's definitely been a little bit of luck in their run, and this is a good place for it to kind of come to an end. Talked about San Diego State. Arizona, I think the number's still a little short. I know it's like 13, but Princeton just won the Ivy basically because they had the home crowd, and that's just not going to be the case. They're going out to Sacramento to play Arizona. I think that's a tough travel spot for Princeton, who just is going to be outmatched. Ballo's going to have a heck of a game. I think if you like props, you're looking at that. He's just going to be able to catch everything off the backboard, so should be a good performance from him. And then I'm going to lay it against Kennesaw as well. I think Xavier, who had a little bit of a heartbreaker there at the Big East, is in a perfect scenario to go in and cover a big number against a team that finally got to the tournament for their first time. There's no experience there, none. Right. And honestly, I really feel like it should be Liberty still, but that's a talk for another time.
We need Darius McGee back in the dance. What the heck?
Right. It's not great for the ASUN, but it's still great for Kennesaw, and that's awesome. We love.
What are you, a Kennesaw? Like, what is this? Like a Kennesaw grad just coming out party over here?
Look. I like Kennesaw. I think they're a fun team. And obviously the story, like going from like 2 or 3 wins in 5 years is really awesome to see. But this is exactly the type of place where like it kind of stops, right? You're going up against a storied program. And even without Fremantle, Xavier has performed really well offensively. I think
better defensively of late without him.
Yeah, for sure. And Suli Boom is just like another guy that you want to have your wagers on in March. So props, I'm definitely looking at him to take over too. He's a spectacular player that could fuel a run for his team or any team you put him on. So hopefully he stays at Xavier though. It's fun player.
Take a sip of water. That is
I don't even have one with me. I'm just doing this on the fly, man. I love it.
I'll pass my bottle virtually here. There we go. You can take a sip. That a lot of bets there from Justin. That's obviously the shot quality data is fantastic, but that's why I wanted him on. He's going to give you a lot of great information and a lot of wagers to go along with it. And you know there will be the people coming after you when you only hit 54% of your bets in the first round, of course, right? You do well. But I like all of your sides, by the way. I'm with you on a lot of those. The one concern, and a couple of games that I want to hit out of, then we'll get to our final four picks and get out of here, or at least a team that I like in the market, a bet that I made before we recorded this podcast. That Indiana game, man, it scares. I don't think I've sworn yet when doing this Outside Shots podcast. For people that used to listen to me, I swore a lot on previous podcasts I did. And I like to keep it clean because sometimes you have parents listening to kids and all that stuff. So I'm just going to let it rip. It's a Sunday night. Why the hell not? That game scares the shit out of me because I have Indiana futures. And just to preface here, I think it's really important, no matter what futures bet or bets you have, to not stick with those teams automatically. You don't just want to say, okay, I have a future, because everything is matchup dependent. I did a video on this over in the Lines YouTube channel as well. Everything is matchup dependent. And we saw it against Penn State, and that's not a Penn State team that's going to pressure the ball. And this Kent State team does pressure the ball. They have the 20th highest takeaway percentage in college basketball, whether it's Jacobs or Sincere Carry. Golden Flashes will generate a lot of takeaways. And you think about Indiana not having Xavier Johnson, it means a lot in this matchup, considering Jalen Hood-Schifino is your only true ball handler. I know he's a really good shot maker in the mid-range, like you mentioned, but being the only true reliable ball handler on Indiana, I know you have Galloway and Bates a little bit off the bench, but Bates isn't a great ball handler, at least creating off the dribble-wise, and Galloway could be a little loose with the ball. Now, you do have the one exception, which is you have a point forward in Trayce Jackson-Davis. You have a guy who has a higher assist rate than Yogi Ferrell from that Indiana team when they won the Big Ten championship regular season going back to 2015, 2016. So, again, I liked Indiana a lot. I was also hoping that Xavier Johnson would be back. But against a team that could space the floor, can space you out, even though they're not super efficient, that's where Indiana struggles, like we saw against Penn State, and they really struggle against ball pressure. And you also mentioned that Kent State doesn't have a big to go up against Jackson Davis. That I agree with you on. So if Indiana, again, it all boils down to tempo here. If Indiana's controlling the pace and getting lobs to Jackson Davis in transition, Hoosiers probably win the game by double digits. But it scares me a lot. And then Memphis FAU, to me, even though I want to see the Tigers blitz those freshman guards of Purdue in the round of 32, FAU could shoot, man.
They really can.
They really can. So I'm not completely sold on that game. Still kind of a toss-up, and I know it's sitting at around 2.5 as of this recording, but man, Elijah Martin can really score, really athletic guard too, not just a shooter for the Owls. So two games that stood out for me that you touched on that I just wanted to give a quick take on, because I love Indiana. I love Trayce Jackson-Davis, one of the best players in the last couple decades, this era of college basketball, but I am scared shitless of Kent State.
I mean, you're gonna love this then. I mean, we're projecting Indiana to win this game by 11.7 points over at Shot Quality, giving them an 85% chance to win. So
I don't know.
We really like the matchup. I mean, look, the passing, I know you said you're a little bit worried, but they have effectively passed the ball into like rating in the top 30 in passing metrics for Shot Quality. They are setting up good looks. They are finding the more effective ones. I've been down on Indiana plenty this season. I feel like that allows me to be a little bit fair here.
That's a good point.
They don't shoot a lot lot of threes. It's not great, right? They don't take the most valuable shot. 350.
Miller Kopp is scared to shoot the ball.
For sure. 355th in three-point attempt rate, according to our data, and that's just like, it's low. But they also defend the three-point shot pretty well. A lot of what they do is very effective. Transition attack is really good. They don't let opponents get to the rim much, so they limit effective looks. Good in the post, as we know, help develop a lot of those nice under the rim baskets. I just think that's the type of thing that you want to feel a little bit more comfortable hanging your hat on than, say, a Kent State that relies on forcing those defensive turnovers. Well, you get out of the MAC. Is it the same thing? Are you going to be able to generate those extra possessions?
They did it against
a team
Houston,
like Indiana?
and they did it against Gonzaga.
I know. But we'll have to see. It's a little bit different when you're in the tournament versus when you're in the non-conference. So
sure.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. But they also, it's going to be a very interesting meld of tendencies, right? Because Kent State does let you shoot the three, and Indiana has no interest in taking it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that extra space on either side sort of plays out.
Yeah, 0 for 9 between, I think 2 of 14 overall, but 0 for 9 between Galloway, Kopp, and Hood-Schifino in that Penn State game in the semifinal. You could tell I had an Indiana future to win the Big Ten tournament. If they win that game, I think they're sweeping Purdue. So
everyone wanted to see it. I feel like they would have done it too.
Yeah. So, no, man, I cannot wait for that game. But it transitions well into our Final Four picks. And I don't have a champion yet. I haven't even filled out my bracket yet, to be completely honest, because of all the work you and I have both been doing for our respective companies. And Justin does great work at Shot Quality. Obviously, follow him on Twitter at JustinPerry8. Follow Shot Quality on Twitter at Shot Quality. And, of course, Shot Quality Bets at Shot Quality Bets. So just want to give out 2 thoughts on Final Four teams. And we'll kind of go one. So I'll give one, you give one, and I think we're in agreement on either one of you, either the main one for you for Final Four pick or one of them in Texas. But I want to give out my bet here because people are probably waiting for me to give out a bet on the podcast. And Arkansas, I can't believe I'm saying this because it is truly full circle from Black Wednesday when I lost San Diego State up 4 with 15 seconds left to these Razorbacks. And I wanted nothing to do with Arkansas from that moment on. But Arkansas 20-1 over at FanDuel Sportsbook to win the West region as a number 8 seed. I know it's crazy, but just let me break it down here for you, Justin. Then you can give me maybe a quick take.
I like their size, so let's hear it.
All right. So, number one, it's baked into the number that the field is as loaded as it is. So, again, you might be staring at that West region saying, how could you have a Final Four bet from the region? Well, again, very talented team that I'll get to in a second, but the number is inflated because of the region the Hogs are in. So just take that into account before I break this down here. You have 2 lottery picks and arguably 2 top 5 picks in Nick Smith, who's finally back, and he's been playing well, obviously, since coming back in mid to late February from that knee injury, and Anthony Black, who's a very good on-ball and off-ball defender. You're a bit limited offensively if you're the Hogs because you don't shoot the ball really well. They rank number 304 in three-point efficiency across college basketball. And obviously Smith can shoot the ball, and his return obviously has helped that of late, but still not a great three-point shooting team outside of him. And Ricky Council, who can space the floor a bit at times, and Black can as well, but this isn't an elite. Jordan Walsh has been very hesitant from 3, one of their other elite freshman recruits. But they don't face any zone-centric defenses in this region, which is a huge factor when you think about how do you beat Arkansas, especially in the half court, because this team is so elite in transition. You play matchup zone, and none of these teams really run any semblance of a matchup zone. And obviously you could throw matchup zone against Arkansas. You can simulate it in practice. You could throw it into a given game, but it's a little bit different in terms of teams that have experienced playing in that sort of structure like we saw against Duke last year in the Elite Eight when Arkansas's offense really shut down. You have Eric Musselman leading this team. The Razorbacks have made it to consecutive Elite Eights, not getting over the hump to the Final Four, but still experienced on the sidelines and also experienced a bit on this roster in terms of 2 of those teams, or the last 2 teams that Musselman has coached, Devo Davis on both of those teams, and a huge part of Arkansas's floor spacing, or ineffective floor spacing, but still scoring-wise, Devo Davis, one of the better scorers on this team. But more importantly, you mentioned this from the top, Justin, that defense matters in March. Obviously, that goes without saying. And Arkansas has the 16th rated adjusted defensive efficiency across college basketball. They turn you over at the 60th highest rate in the country. You have size, you have length, like you said before I started to dig into this with the Mitchell twins. So the question is can they overcome their struggles of late? Because they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. But that kind of counters what I mentioned earlier when I was talking about conference tournament winners. Their seeding might be inflated. Their market rating might be inflated because they won their conference tournament in terms of a game-by-game spread or Final Four futures number. And I think Arkansas, you're getting a really good number on this team considering they were around 11-1 or so going back to earlier in the month and even last month. So I really like the Hogs. I think they're making it out of this region. Crazy, but just one more point here I want to bring up before you probably counter and smush my Arkansas pick here.
No.
Good matchup against Illinois in the first round, considering how much Illinois turns it over. Granted, they do turn you over, but Illini issues like we brought up earlier on from a cohesion standpoint and a lot of turnover issues. Then you get Kansas, and I know you're going to like this here, Justin, because number one, Kevin McCullough's back issue is a huge factor when you think about the Jayhawks and the defending national champions. But Kansas has the second most record luck on shot quality among teams with at least 27 wins. This team, if you look at close game luck, and I think 11 or 12 of their wins have come by 1 or 2 possessions, which is definitely notable when you think about a team's market rating and how they could be overvalued in the market. So, long story short, like Arkansas to win the region. I talked for about 20 minutes or so on the Hogs here.
No.
Have at it, Justin.
Look, I think the record luck thing is really important. It's a tough one to understand, honestly, because shot quality, win percentage versus actual win percentage is honestly the biggest difference between like what's actually happening and what is, I guess expected to be happening. And there's a couple big wins there for Kansas that actually shot quality had as losses: TCU game, West Virginia game, Texas Tech game. All in a row, actually, between February 20th and February 28th were expected to be losses, and the team won. So, we actually have their defense as predicted to be a little bit worse than what's going on. So there might be a little bit of luck involved in teams just shooting a little bit poorly against that Kansas Jayhawks team. So you get a team like Arkansas who can come in and maybe bully their way to a couple better looks and get some open threes against them.
Get out in transition against a Kansas defense. And per shot quality, that's their biggest defensive liability is transition defense.
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely a pretty large liability for them. They're also actually pretty bad at cuts to the hoop. So make sure that the Arkansas team is cutting to the basket. That'll help them against Kansas. But, we definitely agree on Texas. I think that's actually a really good sleeper pick in Arkansas. One of my sleeper picks for if you wanted to come out of that specific region, it is crazy loaded. And some of the teams in this region, right? St. Mary's, UConn, TCU, Gonzaga, Northwestern, UCLA, all fighting against that Arkansas and Illinois winner and Kansas. I mean, that is just ridiculous. I think that's probably, one of the craziest regions. Almost every season, the West always seems to end up like that. And you get to stay up late and watch those games, which is fun. I think for me coming out of there, I think that, St. Mary's is probably getting slept on a little bit. They get that matchup against VCU, but everyone thinks the A-10 is terrible. And if anyone's even close to correct, then, St. Mary's should cruise on into the second round.
Rams got a lot of shooting luck in the A-10 tournament title game too.
Yeah, they did. And then look, UConn coming off of that game, they're ideally going to beat Iona. That would be awesome to see.
Are they?
I think so.
Dan Hurley against Rick Pitino.
The problem is that Iona is not usually the smaller team on the court. I think they're going to struggle with that, honestly. But let's say you get UConn St. Mary's and think that is going to be a crazy matchup that I think St. Mary's has a really good chance to come out of. And then, again, they get to face that Kansas team or that Arkansas team. I don't know. The West is going to be crazy. I think, Texas feels like they have a little bit of an easier run. In my perspective, they're a top 5 team on shot qualities data for defense. We posted an interesting trend on our Twitter today. I believe out of the last 5 years, out of the last 4 years, 5, of course, COVID ruined one, but there's a really interesting shot here. Like when you lead shot quality in defense, you have it's happened really well, and that's Iowa State this year is far and away the best defense on shot quality. So if you don't trust Texas, I think Iowa State's worth a really, really interesting sprinkle. I think that defense could cause problems if you really think it travels. They are elite. I know the adjusted defensive metrics are a little bit different for them, but they're still going to come into the top 10 for that. I think you really need it to be one of those top 10 defensive metric teams to make the Final Four, probably without a doubt top 20 in terms of defensive efficiencies. So St. Mary's is really interesting to me. Iowa State's really interesting to me. The problem is, of course, is that UCLA, Alabama, and Houston are all going to be pretty weak spots. I think I know that Houston might not be now with the Sasser injury, but yet to see how he's going to do. But I think you want one of those teams, even a San Diego State, if they can just clamp you down for a couple games and get some good shooting luck, that's the type of thing that can lead you to win the big dance, right? It's not necessarily, who is actually the best team. It's who is dependable in certain places, and then because of that, gives them a chance to be lucky enough to win, right?
That's what we touched on with UNC from the get-go.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say too. UNC had these facets that continue to put them in places to get lucky. And that's why playing futures throughout the season is really about getting the best number and finding yourself on good lottery tickets, because it is so much luck. I mean, you can't win the national championship without some hot shooting days, an opponent going cold. It's just, you're very, very hard pressed to find, 6 straight wins against teams that performed as expected or better. There's going to be some luck along the way. So, make sure you take that into your considerations. Don't get too upset if your 35-1 doesn't hit. It's a tough game. It's a tough game, but it should be a really fun one. I mean, these games are going to be awesome. I mean, that's why I always try to make sure I only bet enough where I'm into it, but I can still watch the next game if I take an L. So
right, for sure. Going back to Texas here really quick, and then we'll get out of here. Justin, you go back to 2019 when Texas Tech was the runner-up, losing to Virginia. I had a long shot ticket on Texas Tech that season. That overtime session was not very fun after they made a late comeback. Jarrett Culver and that Chris Beard-led team. And obviously, Chris Beard was the coach of Texas. Now it's Rodney Terry and Longhorns coming off of that Big 12 tournament championship. So the comparisons to me, not only was it Beard's old team, and obviously currently old team, even though he's probably going to become the new, or seemingly the new Ole Miss coach. Yeah, but you think about front courts, and this Texas front court is just as athletic, if not more athletic, than that Texas Tech front court with Tariq Owens and Lawrence Odiase. So I know the guard play gets a lot of hype for Texas, and Marcus Carr finding his shot finally in the Big 12 tournament championship game against Kansas should pay dividends for Texas in March Madness. But you have Dylan DeSue, Mitchell, 5-star freshman, and Bishop up front. This is a very, very athletic Texas front court that can give opposing front courts fits, but also generate transition opportunities for their guards and Sir'Jabari Rice, who I haven't even mentioned yet.
Yeah, so I was they have so many options, Texas, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Is you can't scheme out any one of their options.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the knock against Purdue, right? Is that, okay, if you figure out how to take Edey out of the game, if you can St. Peter's this team a little bit here, right? I mean, it's true. It's true. Texas doesn't feel like they have that same potential. They are honestly, it's going to be a very interesting game against Colgate. A little quick shot quality history, without Colgate, shot quality wouldn't be here, right? That's where it got developed. So this is a big game for us. We actually just tweeted today a little congratulations to Texas because they are one of our teams. So very interesting to see a shot quality team go against the shot quality home a little bit. But look, Texas, man, They force a lot of defensive turnovers, good defense against shots at the rim, efficient attack in the rim themselves. It's just, you're going to have so much trouble. And obviously the committee was like to Colgate that you just don't play anyone anywhere near decent enough, and stuck a perennial returner to the dance at a 15 line as kind of like a, hey guys, that strength of schedule is really rough. But no, it's going to be an interesting matchup. And I think this Texas team really shouldn't be an underdog against anyone right now. And that's just the truth of it. So when you're going to come on a show and say that, you better put them in your Final Four. So.
Right. I have a Texas future going back to the offseason.
Yeah.
I bet that in July. And the number isn't, I wouldn't necessarily say to bet it right now, just because that Penn State potentially round of 32 matchup does scare me, because the Nittany Lions, like we already hit on earlier, do match up really well offensively against a no middle defense that gives up its fair share of open threes. But the big liability, or at least the liability that I thought Texas was going to have this year, was three-point efficiency. But they have the second highest three-point efficiency in Big 12 play. You hit on their ball pressure with Tyrese Hunter, who I think would be a big factor against Penn State, considering he would likely be assigned to Jalen Pickett, one of the best guards in college basketball. But Texas has the third-rated adjusted defensive efficiency per Bart Torvik since last month. So over the last month, Texas is one of the best defenses in college basketball. We saw them give up 100-plus points to Kansas State earlier on in conference play. So their defense is finally right. Timmy Allen, per Ronnie Terry, who missed the last couple games of the Big 12 tournament, is back at full capacity, which is huge considering how well he does getting his hands in the passing lanes. And again, I mentioned that three-point defense for Texas. It's a little bit of a concern if they play Penn State, but for the potential Sweet 16 matchups, when you think about Iowa State, who I still think isn't necessarily as good as you mentioned earlier on, but again, it would still be a tough matchup, considering it's a Big 12 foe. Mississippi State, who is dreadful from three. Xavier could definitely space them out, but again, I think they've gotten pretty lucky in their fair share of games as well. So I think Texas has a pretty good path, besides the Penn State potential matchup in the round of 32, honestly, to get to the Elite Eight. And then the Marcus Sasser injury, then for the number one seed in this region, the favorite to win it all throughout much of this season in Houston, definitely looms large. And also the Cougars defense, to me, isn't nearly as elite as it's been in years past, since they don't have that elite defensive wing in Taz Moore going back to last season. So all in all, I like Texas. I don't know if I'm going to have them in my bracket to get to the Final Four just yet. I haven't decided. You kind of made me feel a little bit more optimistic about Indiana than I initially felt after the bracket reveal. But good stuff, man. Great stuff from Justin Perry. Follow him on Twitter at JustinPerry8, working on all things college basketball betting for shot quality and shot quality bets. And remember, thelines.com is giving away a $25 Amazon gift card in our daily March Madness Pick'em contest. For more details, head over to play.thelines.com. We'll have our bracket contest live on the website on Monday, and subscribe to The Lines on Apple or Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Justin, any last words here?
No, man, and just thank you so much for having me. This was a blast to break down the games. Check out the Shot Quality Bets website. We are about to have a new value bracket system that kind of leverages the usage data across various bracket sites to understand like where we have the best market advantage on using shot quality picks versus what everyone else has. So that's coming out tomorrow morning on Monday at around 9 or 10 a.m. Eastern. So just go sign up for the site. You should get access to it without too much hassle. And give me a follow on Twitter. Shoot me any questions about shot quality. Always excited to talk about advanced metrics and trying to figure out college basketball so we can win some bets.
Awesome. You can follow The Lines on Twitter at TheLinesUS. You can follow me on Twitter at Eli Herskovich. Thanks for checking out this March Madness betting preview presented by TheLines.com. It's Outside Shots.